Today's date, September 2nd, marks 70 years since the end of World War II. On this day, in 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allied forces at the ceremony in Tokyo Bay. Officials from the United States, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, and China observed the signing of the instrument of surrender aboard the USS Missouri. But during the war, Japan had been battered to ruins. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is well known. But as Japan fought to the bitter end, the United States military changed strategy and began bombing indiscriminately.
On The Focus tonight, we meet an artist who spent his life depicting the suffering caused by the raids. After being unable to find a home for his art, a helping hand came from an unlikely source. NHK World's John Ledoux has the story.
今日はよろしくお願いいたします。ありがとうございます。どうぞ。ありがとうございます。
Teruo Kano uses the tools of an artist to teach history. His works recount the events of 70 years ago, when American bombers devastated Tokyo. People run through the flames. Kano was one of them. The sight of victims being burned alive is permanently etched in his memory.
These huge planes just kept dropping bombs on us, one after another. It was like seeing a nightmare. I was beyond terrified.
Kano was 14 at the time. He lost everything: his home, his two younger sisters, and his parents. As the war intensified, the U.S. bombers began targeting cities to try and hasten the end. 66 cities across Japan were burned to the ground, killing over 400,000 people. Tokyo was the hardest hit. On one day alone, 100,000 perished.
574 is now across the burnt acres of Tokyo. Close-up cameras show the scars of those spectacular fire strikes last March.
After the war, Kano was unable to attend art school, so he taught himself. He wanted to relate the horrors of his experience in the Tokyo air raids to others. Over the years, he has visited schools across Japan, displaying paintings to tell his story. Many students have written to him afterwards. This message came from a 10-year-old boy.
When I saw your paintings, I decided I never want to go to war because terrible things happen.
At 84, Kano is no longer healthy enough to speak at schools. Some of his paintings are displayed in galleries, but most have been gathering dust in his home. A lack of funds dashed his hopes for a peace memorial to display his work. A solution came from an unexpected source. Brett Fisk is an American novelist who has been researching the air raids. Like everyone, Fisk was familiar with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but he knew very little about the air raids. After hearing about Kano's life and seeing his paintings, Fisk felt an obligation to preserve the works.
There's fires everywhere, and so it wasn't like an instantaneous death. You had people just running around, just utter chaos. The things, I mean, there's things that just brought tears to my eyes, quite frankly, and still the horrific stories that you just can't forget.
Fisk was not in a position to finance a museum, but he was able to build something that would reach an even wider audience: a website.
Initially, we thought about collecting stuff and making a book. One book is not enough, and who knows if it'll be published and that kind of thing. So we decided, well, we can get all of this information and just put it online.
Fisk took photos of Kano's paintings and then uploaded them to the site. a virtual museum, visible everywhere in the world.
At first, I was under the bridge. If I remained there, I would also have burned to death with those victims.
The website also includes interviews with Kano and other survivors, in both Japanese and English. Fisk set out to relate the stories of those on the receiving end of the bombs, to prevent the events from being obscured by politics.
This is just information that we want to put out. Everybody can read it and analyze it and reach their own conclusions. Whatever conclusion they come to, we want it to be based on fact. Not just this side or not just this side, but we want, the whole thing to be accessible.
Kano is grateful for Fisk's collaboration, and he doesn't blame anyone for his losses, not even the American military. The blame, he believes, is properly laid on war itself.
Recollections of the war are beginning to fade. Some people are even giving a mistaken view of historical accounts. That's why it's as important as ever to pass on truthful and collected facts about what really happened.
And NHK World's John Ladu joins us now in the studio. So, John, well, when it comes to World War II, I think the vast majority of the Japanese people would associate it with air raids. We hear about that. We see those scenes in the movies and dramas. We read about that. But apparently, it seems that it's not so much known abroad. Why do you think there's this perception gap?
Well, students in Japan learn a lot about the air raids in school. But people outside the country largely don't know much about it or are taught about the air raids at all. Fisk says that it's largely because there are not a lot of Japanese documents and accounts that are translated into English. That's exactly why his website, japanairraids.org, is such an important project. You can see Kano's paintings in the online museum and hear him talking about his experiences. There's also a timeline of the air raids during the war and historical footage.
And it's completely bilingual.
It's completely bilingual.
Well, I think the website is a great way to share this dark chapter in history. And these air raids took countless civilian lives. Why was this allowed to happen?
Well, in the beginning of the war, the U.S. armed forces targeted military facilities. But near the end, they changed strategies and started hitting cities. And it wasn't just the US. The UK, Germany, and Japan also indiscriminately bombed civilians. I spoke with a Professor Yanagihara from Tokai University, who spent his entire career researching the air raids in World War II. He says when Japan launched an air attack against China in the 1930s, it was the US who criticized Japan for targeting civilians. But then later, the US did exactly the same thing.
They changed their strategy and began targeting cities because at the time, a large number of U.S. pilots were losing their lives. These pilots were being shot down by Japan. Of course, they had families, and this changed public opinion. The fatalities should be on the enemy's side, not the U.S. The U.S. changed the way they went about air raids due to this shift in mentality.
What I think, John, that is important to point out is that the U.S. still do these air raids even today. And when the people discuss about war, somehow the leaders say that we don't send ground forces, but we opt to the air raids. And some people say that makes the war clean. I mean, surely there are less casualties for the U.S. soldiers. And some people say that the targets are pinpointed, so maybe that's why they say that it's a cleaner way. But there are always significant numbers of civilian casualties.
Yes, it's really sad. Actually, as an American, I feel very sad about that. And Kano and Fisk, they strongly believe that they need to convey the realities of the victims of these air raids during World War II. They believe that that will give us a perspective on current events.
Thank you, John.